Midnight Affair, written by Pink Princess 13310. Audio, produced by Mercy Moore. Chapter 1: Jasper's Point of View. It was just past dawn this morning. The sky was grey and there was a light drizzle that was falling lightly to the ground. I had finally reached Philadelphia. I had just visited with Peter and Charlotte and decided to be alone for a while. It was mid-January and so the light drizzle would be cold and hard against any human's face. I could see my breath as I exhaled and knew that it was definitely cold. I was sitting at the base of a tree and was looking down into the deep lake in front of me. As I looked at myself, I could see that my eyes were pitch black and had noticeable purple bruises underneath them. I tried to rarely hunt now, it wearies me very much. I don't get pleasure from feeding on humans anymore because I can feel what they feel. When I was changed, I had a special ability that allowed me to feel the emotions around me and be able to influence the mood to others around me as well. Whenever I hunted, I could feel the human's pain and fear and it made me feel awful. I have gone about 2.5 weeks without feeding, and that is dangerous because I may cause an accident that I would not be proud of. Sadly, I have found no other way of life that can make this easier on me, so I still continue to kill the innocent anyway. I decided that I needed to hunt, so I got up from where I was sitting and walked towards the town not too far away. I soon neared a little diner in the middle of town and thought that this will do. Once I entered, I realized that there were too many people here. I took a quick whiff of air and realized that there weren't just humans here. My eyes soon landed on a lady that was sitting on a stool by the counter. She had short, spiky, dark brown hair and was very petite, almost pixie-like. She looked like she was in her teenage years. She was wearing jeans and a designer jacket that went a little past her thighs. She had pearl earrings in each ear and had a pearl necklace around her neck as well. She hopped off her stool and started walking. My jaw dropped at how graceful she moved. It seemed as if she was dancing. Then I realized that she was walking towards me. This made me tense involuntarily. A vampire never approached me the way that she was walking towards me. Her emotions were happy and excited, and this made me relax a little bit. She stopped in front of me and smiled.
"You've kept me waiting a long time,"
she said as she looked at me and then zeroed in on my eyes. She had the most beautiful smile on her face that had me staring at her in awe. I breathed in lightly and looked at her normally. "I'm sorry, Mom." I spoke to her in an apologetic tone and I heard my southern accent peak as I said these words to her. Then out of nowhere she stuck out her hand and looked at me expectantly. Her eyes were silently pleading for I don't know what. I assessed her emotions again and felt happiness, content, and love. The last one confused me a little because she didn't even know me. Something about her made me feel better and I seemed to make up my mind. I brought my hand out to hers and they joined each other.
"Will you come with me?"
she asked in a more confident tone as she looked at me with certainty. "Where are we going? I don't even know your name," I said to her, a little confused. Her eyes then sparked with understanding and she led us to an empty booth.
"My name is Alice,"
she said with a smile on her face that was perfect. She sat down on the opposite seat from me. I then noticed that our hands were still linked on the table. I started to say who I was, but she cut me off easily with the light bell-like voice of hers.
"Jasper Whitlock,"
she completed for me. She smiled as I looked at her, confused as to how she knew my name. "How do you know who I am?" I asked her as I shifted to sit up straight in the chair as I focused on her more.
"When I was changed, I acquired the ability to see into the future. It doesn't work all the time though. It has to be a concrete decision. Otherwise the visions change multiple times until the real outcome is made. When I had woken up, I guess you could say, I saw a vision of your face. Then I received another one that had me and you together,"
she said as the hesitancy came back into her voice. She had seen us together, and by the sound of how she said this, we were happy. I had so many questions to ask her, but before I opened my mouth she stopped me.
"I had seen you and me.
She paused, looking at me as if waiting for me to be frightened of her.
I saw us together. We were happy and we were with others like us. That is when I decided that I didn't want to be alone. So I found this place that I had found in my vision of where I would see you first and came here in hopes that I would be able to meet you someday.
She finished as she stared at me once more. I nodded and let everything set in. I didn't want to be alone either. I had never wanted to be alone, but my depression forced me away from others. Something about Alice made me feel better as a person. It felt like the depression was dissipating and it made me feel happier. I smiled fondly at her. You said your name was Alice. What is your last name? I asked her quietly as I leaned forward a little and gazed at her eyes. They were gold. How was that even possible?
I don't remember my human life. All I remember is me waking up in Mississippi in the woods outside of a small town. There was no one there around me. I was alone and I didn't know what to do.
She whispered as she looked down at her lap. Sadness, discomfort, and anger rolled off of her. Did I upset you? I asked her gently and with apology. She looked up at me and shook her head slightly.
No, of course not. It just makes me upset to not be able to know how my human life was. I wish that I did. I would have so much more to tell you about me. I am sorry,
she murmured to me quietly. I looked at her and her face was heartbreaking. I noticed that our hands were still clasped on the table and I gave her hand a gentle squeeze. She looked up at me and smiled slightly. I sent waves of calm toward her and she sighed quietly.
Thank you,
she whispered to me. She smiled and giggled as she saw my facial expression. Her laugh was beautiful and it sounded as if she was singing. For what? I asked her as I grinned slightly.
You calmed me down a lot, and so I said thank you.
She said as if I should have guessed that on my own. How do you know about that? I asked her.
I have seen it. You use it mainly when people are frantic and you calm them down quite easily.
She answered lightly. Oh, was all I said in response. We were silent for a moment and then she stood.
Now that I have explained some things about me, will you come with me?
She asked tenderly. I stood up with her and smiled. Yes. I don't want to be alone either, I replied. Her smile widened and she gave my hand a squeeze.
Thank you so much,
she whispered as we walked out the door of the diner. It was now raining and it was very windy. There were very few people on the street and the people that were there had umbrellas and heavy raincoats on. Alice led us to the trees and soon found a dry clearing and sat down. I followed and sat down across from her. She released my hand and smiled. I have a question, I started as I looked into her golden topaz eyes.
What?
She asked me as she raised her eyebrows delicately. Your eyes. They are gold. How do you do that? I asked her.
I hunt differently than you do. Instead of hunting humans, I hunt animals.
She answered my question easily. You can do that? I asked her in awe.
Yes, and you can too. Animals taste nothing like humans, but it still helps with the hunger. It still somewhat satisfies you,
she told me. I nodded and looked up at the trees around me. Then I sighed. I would like to try that.
We can try it now if you want to. Your eyes are black anyways,
she told me. It shocked me a little that she knew what I was thinking, but then again she could see the future. I nodded and stood up and offered her a hand. She smiled and took it without thinking about it and was at my side. We ran farther into the forest and then she stopped us both.
Can you smell it? It smells very light and different, but it's there,
she said. I nodded and inhaled deeply. I could smell a faint scent of blood. It definitely wasn't human. She released my hand then and I ran off to find where the scent was coming from. I soon found a deer a couple of yards away eating a patch of grass. I slowly stalked forward and soon enough I was close enough to get it. I jumped and when it looked up it was too late. I quickly snapped its neck and drank the contents inside of it. When I finished I quickly disposed of it. When I turned around Alice was appearing out of the trees with a smile plastered on her face. She came up to me.
See, I knew you could do it,
she whispered and gave me a hug. I tensed as she made this physical contact. I had never really been hugged in my vampire life before and it made me feel odd. Something about Alice made me want to wrap my arms around her and never let go. But I only slightly hugged her back. Then she pulled away.
I'm sorry,
she stuttered as she took a step back. Then she opened her mouth to explain.
I just feel that I have known you for so long and I have forgotten that you barely know me. My apologies,
she stated. I just nodded. I didn't mind that much. It just felt different to me. I held out my hand and she smiled and took it. We walked for a while, not really paying any attention to where we were going, and then Alice turned to me.
I am so glad I found you. I'd been waiting there for a long time now,
she said to me as she looked up at my face. Before I could say anything, her eyes glazed over and she went limp. Before she fell completely to the ground, I caught her and held her in my arms. Alice, I asked her as I shook her gently. What was wrong with her? Alice. I spoke again a little louder as she didn't respond the first time. Then she stirred. What happened? I asked as I looked down at her.
Oh, I never explained this to you. When I have my visions, sometimes I tend to lose all control and it is as if I was asleep or something like that,
she said as if nothing had happened. You scared me, I said as I hugged her tightly against me. It had only been about 7 hours with her and it felt like I knew her so well and I was comfortable around her. I released her slowly, making sure that she didn't fall again.
I'm fine,
she reassured me as I let her go. What did you see? I asked her.
I saw the Cullens. Well, not all of them. Edward was away hunting,
she said.
We were there too.
What were we doing? I asked.
We were all sitting around what looked like a conference table and we were all laughing. I don't know what we were laughing at though,
she replied. Where do they live? I questioned her.
I don't know where they live now, but when we meet them they will be in Denali, Alaska, I think,
she answered. Wait. How long have you been waiting for me? I asked.
I've been waiting for you for about 11 years now,
she replied.
I was afraid that you would never be there and I would be alone,
she added as she looked down. I looked at her and grinned. Well, you found me, I murmured as I shifted closer to her and squeezed her small hand that fit perfectly in mine. I looked down at her and I felt so many emotions rolling off of her. I felt reassurance, happiness, comfort, and the one that took over the most was love. These emotions were directed at me. And the part that confused me the most is that I felt the same about her. I think that I love her.